We're here at the home of Dave and Mary Buchanan, who are longtime members of Grace Church, just having a little bit of a chat. The Buchanans and the Fleshers were the first people that I got to know when we started coming to Grace Church, which was probably, I think, about 2003. Dave was always one of the ushers, and very personable, very welcoming. And we always really appreciated his humor and his friendliness. We found out that he loved trains, that he was very active in Scouts. Both Dave and Mary had leadership positions in the church, Mary in the Women's Society. Dave was the council Chairman, thank you. Council chairman for many years. There was also something else about Dave that was kind of unique. I'm reminded of the Superman comics, where Superman's friend, Jimmy Olsen, who was a reporter at the Daily Planet, he always had a secret way of getting in touch with Superman if he needed him, because he had this watch that he could use to summon Superman. Well, Dave had an arrangement like that with Santa Claus. If we needed Santa Claus to come to a church Christmas party, Dave always had some connection with the big guy and was able to summon him to make that appearance. So we just want to welcome you, and can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with Grace Church and things that you remember?
Well, we were married at Grace Church in 1969, and we've been at Grace Church ever since. Mary's parents had moved here from Pittsburgh and had looked around Harrisburg for a church, and someone said, "Why don't you try Grace?" So they did, and they were here for years.
1964, started going to Grace.
Wow.
Until they passed away, they were members of Grace. So we came and we loved it and got involved, and the more you get involved, the more you want to stay.
You know, the feeling of being wanted, or the friendships you develop through the church is absolutely amazing, and that's what sustained us all these years too, I think.
How many years were you chairman of the administrative council?
Oh, I think it was 9 or 10 years, but I was chairman of the trustees for about 6 years before that. So I never did get a rest. I went from one to the other. But that's part of being a member of the Grace Church, is being involved.
I think that's an important part of being a member of any church, is to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
And to know the other people there and to help them out when they need help too. So.
Yeah, there's a camaraderie at Grace that's just unbelievable. The best type. And any time we ever had a problem, we got together and solved that problem. It took a toll on some people because we had some big problems, and we wouldn't sleep at night knowing that we were the administrative council of the church, and what we did affected everybody in the church. But we came through.
A lot of teamwork.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. This last time when the bishop was going to close the church, there was a small group of people who got together, went to many, many meetings, not only at the church, but historic Harrisburg had us at probably 10 meetings, talking not only with us but the other churches that were slated to be closed. And fortunately, we were the ones that survived. But it was a lot of hard work, a lot of prayers. But it worked, and then I was in rehab after a hospital stay when the church had a meeting with the candidate that the district superintendent brought to the church to be our new pastor. And that happened on a Tuesday evening. Probably around 9 o'clock they broke up. And the next morning at 9 o'clock, a gentleman came into my room with a bow tie on. And I looked at him and I said, "Who in the world are you?" And he introduced himself as Mike Minnix, my new pastor. And just drained me of all the problems that I thought I still had. I knew right there and there that Grace was going to survive. When he left, my eyes just welled up, and I just couldn't believe that all the hard work that was done had paid off.
What do you think the secret of that was? Why? You said that, that we survived. Why do you think that was?
We wanted to stay together. We wanted the type of service that we still have. The music. We didn't want to lose the music. We didn't want to lose the preaching.
The traditional services.
The traditional service. In the sanctuary that's probably one of the most beautiful in the area. So, to all of us that tried to save the church, it was a big part of our lives. And we didn't want that to change. We knew it had meaning for more than just us.
It was family.
It was. It was.
So here we are in the midst of this pandemic. How do you think that, what kind of challenge does that present for us? And what, are you optimistic about Grace's future?
I'm optimistic. I'm hoping that once we get back into the sanctuary, that our numbers will grow, that the word of mouth will get around, that hey, there is a really good service at Grace every Sunday. The experience is overwhelming, and you want to be part of it. Come and check us out.
Is there anything else that you want to tell the viewers, either about you yourselves or your family, or any kind of message, since this will probably be going out to some people who maybe don't know you as well as we do?
You want to say?
Go ahead.
We met at college. We went to a Methodist school, West Virginia Wesleyan College in Buchanan, West Virginia, and had a great experience there. Mary was in her senior year. I transferred in after 2 years in the military and a year in Vietnam. So I was a transfer student, and we met, and then she graduated and I was a year behind her. And she came from Pittsburgh originally. I came from Brooklyn, New York. This is halfway between. But we liked it here, and we stayed here. And Grace Church was one of the reasons we stayed here.
Yeah.
You want to tell us a little about your family?
We have a daughter who's got married at Grace Church 21 years ago now, I guess. And They have 2 daughters, live about 2 blocks away. Our son is married. They live around 4 miles away and have 3 children. So the grandchildren keep us busy and kind of on track with what's going on and how we're supposed to be doing things in this pandemic. So they're a joy to have around.
First question they ask when they come in the door is, did Grandpa get in trouble today?
And my answer is always yes.
Why do they ask that? What kinds of things do you do to get into trouble?
It could be almost anything.
Almost anything. Some things a little tiny that you wouldn't even think about. I don't give it a second thought, but they want to know if I got in trouble.
They're always looking for him to get into trouble. It might be that he didn't take the garbage down to the garage, you know. It might be he forgot to take his medicine, you know.
Well, you know, the late Congressman John Lewis had this expression about good trouble. So I'll ask, do you think that this trouble that you're in, is this good trouble or not?
Oh yeah, it's good. We have something we can share with the grandchildren.
And it's something they look forward to asking, and it gives them a good laugh, which is important. And I think it's important to maintain those relationships with your kids and your grandchildren. We've been very fortunate that way.
Well, we have been very fortunate and very blessed to have you among our members for so long, and I know you've really enriched the lives of the people of Grace Church, and you've been a blessing to us, and we just pray God's blessing on you, and thank you for your time and for doing this interview.
Well, thank you.
Good morning, Grace Church. This morning's first scripture reading is from Exodus 12, verses 1 to 14, called the First Passover Instituted. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall mark for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell the whole congregation of Israel that on the 10th of this month they are to take a lamb for each family, a lamb for each household. If a household is too small for a whole lamb, It shall join its closest neighbor in obtaining one. The lamb shall be divided in proportion to the number of people who eat of it. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a year-old male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it until the 14th day of this month. Then the whole assembled congregation of Israel shall slaughter it at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the lamb that same night. They shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted over a fire, with its head, legs, and inner organs. You shall let none of it remain until the morning. Anything that remains until the morning you shall burn. This is how you should eat it: your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it hurriedly. It is the Passover of the Lord. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both human beings and animals. On all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague shall destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be a day of remembrance for you. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord. Throughout your generations, you shall observe it as a perpetual ordinance. This is the reading of the Lord. Thanks. A reading from Psalm 119, verses 33 to 40. Teach me, O Lord, the way of your statutes, and I will observe it to the end. Give me understanding, that I may keep your law and observe it with my whole heart. Lead me in the path of your commandments, for I delight in it. Turn my heart to your decrees, and not to selfish gain. Turn my eyes from looking at vanities. Give me life in your ways. Confirm to your servant your promise, which is for those who fear you. Turn away the disgrace that I dread, for your ordinances are good. See, I have longed for your precepts. In your righteousness, give me life. The word of the Lord.
Today we consider a passage from the 18th chapter of Matthew where Jesus is teaching his disciples. He's teaching them something I think that is urgently important for us to hear and to understand. But there's no action that takes place. There's not an event surrounding this passage, only the words of Jesus to his followers. Matthew 18, beginning at verse 15. If another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when the two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. This is the gospel of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. We are living in a time that is most appropriately characterized by the term individualism or individualistic. We tend to value our personal privacy and our time, and we don't like anyone else telling us what to do. How many times have you heard that in the past couple of months as we face coronavirus and the recommendation to wear masks to protect ourselves and others against spread of the virus? Have you ever watched the old television series, The Twilight Zone? I remember watching Rod Serling as a kid and a teenager, and some of those far out and frightening episodes. Well, I have an idea for one. I've never quite seen it on Twilight Zone, but I think it would be interesting. Oh, and of course, I'm aware that there's a reinvention of the Twilight Zone that's new on television. I haven't seen any of those episodes yet. Well, my idea for a Twilight Zone episode is where one person's actions directly affect another person. So that if I drop something on my foot, the other guy's foot hurts. Not mine, but hers or his or theirs. Or if I achieve something of importance and am rewarded for it, the reward doesn't go to me, it goes to the other person. So we are paired up, we human beings, and we're able to see the actions and the consequences, the good actions or the not so good actions that I take affect the life of someone else and influence them and determine what their life experience is. Well, I think that would be an interesting episode, and a writer could work all kinds of fascinating things to show us how that would work. But as I think about it, I'm not quite so sure that's as far out an idea as I initially thought it was, because in fact, the actions that we take do indeed affect others. The things that we do, the things that we say, do affect other people and their lives, and the things that others do and say affect me. And we don't live the kind of separate, individual lives that sometimes we imagine we do. We live in a society that is individual-oriented, where it's easy to pretend that we're not dependent on each other and that we don't affect each other and that others don't affect us. But we live in that kind of environment where we imagine ourselves to be insulated and individual and free from all other influences. If we hold on to that idea and we bring it in too close to ourselves, it makes it impossible to conceive of the importance of what Jesus is getting at in Matthew 18. The church discipline that Jesus recommended in our text assumes that there is a close-knit community of committed people of faith in the church. But few churches can claim that in our age of radical individualism, there is such a close-knit community. In our litigious society, we are more apt to solve our differences by going to court than by sitting down and talking with each other. The erosion of community, the erosion of people's ability to talk with each other, to lessen conflict, to solve problems, is well documented. Several years ago, I read an important book, and I say it's important because I quote it so often and I talk about it with some frequency. It was a book by an author named Robert Putnam, and he entitled it Bowling Alone, America's Declining Social Capital. And he gets the title of his book from a statistic that he came across. He says that between 1980 and 1993, the total number of people in America who bowled in a bowling alley increased by 10%. But at the same time, those who bowled as part of a team or as part of a league decreased by 40%. So Putnam says, we are in fact bowling alone, more so than we ever have in the past. Those who are bowling are going to the alley by themselves or just with a group of friends on a Friday night to do something fun. They're not doing it as part of a disciplined team or a league that bowls together regularly and keeps track of their scores and of their wins and their losses. We are busy doing our own thing, Putnam says, and bowling alone is simply one symptom of the decline of associational life in our country. The rate at which people voluntarily associate with each other and work with each other on particular projects in particular institutions is declining and declining rapidly. We see it in the church. We see how in our church the numbers of people who are part of the community of faith is declining and declining rapidly. And it is so not only at Grace Church, but in the past 20 years, but at all other churches. There are, of course, anecdotal places where that is not the case, but they are merely anecdotal. The trend and the totals are declining rapidly. Well, in his book, Putnam gives several examples because this is happening not only in the church, but all across the culture of North America. Here are a few things that he says. No one is left from the Glen Valley, Pennsylvania Bridge Club who can tell us precisely when or why the group broke up. Even though its 40-odd members were still playing regularly as recently as 1990, just as they had done for more than half a century. The shock in Little Rock, Arkansas Sertoma Club, however, is still painful. In the mid-1980s, nearly 50 people had attended the weekly luncheon to plan activities to help the hearing and speech impaired. But a decade later, only 7 regulars continued to show up. The Roanoke, Virginia chapter of the NAACP had been an active force in civil rights since 1918. But during the 1990s, its membership withered from about 2,500 to just a few hundred. By November 1998, even a heated contest for president drew only 57 voting members. The trust level in public institutions has suffered serious erosion in our generation. Volunteer organizations are disappearing and not being replaced by other, newer, and stronger ones. Talk shows trade on distrust and anger and frustration and do nothing to enhance community connections. Even the nightly news favors stories that stoke anger and frustration and fear and distrust. In such a climate, do we really believe that we could do as Jesus instructs and bring individual members before the congregation for dialogue and possible discipline? I don't think so. They're more likely to bail out than they are to listen to the care and the correction and the advice that others in the church might give them. But there are signs of hope. Signs of hope that this decline in associational life, as Robert Putnam terms it, might not be terminal. Wayne Hilliker told a story about a television program he saw that showed a group of young people who were about to receive their driver's licenses, 16-year-olds. They were sitting in a courtroom and preparing to receive their driver's licenses. They were listening to 2 speakers who appeared to be a father and his teenage son as they talked to this group about the responsibilities of driving. The teenager spoke first. He never looked up with his eyes. He talked with his eyes cast down, and he slowly and quietly told his story about something that had happened to him less than a year before. He'd been driving too fast, he said, and he'd lost control of his car. The car went off the road and it collided with a tree. He managed to survive, but his passenger, his best friend, died suddenly there of a broken neck. And he went on to describe quite graphically what his buddy looked like and how he felt and how he struggled to go on after that incident, not able to forgive himself for what he had done. And then the young man sat down, and the man sitting beside him stood up. But that man turned out to be not his father, but he was the father of the boy whom this driver had killed. The father spoke quietly with difficulty, but also with dignity. He went on to share with that room full of soon-to-be licensed teenage drivers what it meant for him as a father and the boy's mother to lose their only child. He described in quite a bit of detail the kind of young man their son was. He went on to imagine some of the possible contributions that their son might have made to the community had he lived. He pointed out how proud he had been of his son and how proud he was then of this young man beside him who was willing to testify in this manner to other drivers in such a painful and costly and yet powerful way. The reconciliation between that father and that teenage driver was born out of their mutual desire to see some kind of saving possibility, some kind of positive result arise out of the death of a precious loved one. When I hear of stories like that and when I see things like that happen, I have to believe that God has been allowed to work in just those sorts of situations. I believe that there is no more damaging failure in our church today than our failure to take seriously Jesus' instruction to reconcile ourselves to each other, to seek and practice forgiveness, to desire and foster the healing of relationships within our community of faith, within our families. If we can't do it in the church, then there's virtually no hope that it can be done anywhere else. I've seen churches, I've worked in churches, deeply damaged by conflicts and broken relationships, and the flat-out refusal of folks to own their anger and their hurt and then deal with them in the manner that Jesus prescribes. It's not only within our church, however, but throughout our world, in public areas, in politics, in sports, in schools, in corporations, in governments, in nations. We seek to return hurt for hurt, offense for offense, damaging the very fabric of life, hurting people far beyond the pain that we've experienced, seeking revenge while forgetting that we are the people who enjoy the benefits of God's redemption, the benefits of God's reconciliation, God's forgiveness, and God's love. All of us are tempted to strike back when we are hurt. All of us are tempted to hold on to resentments, even to the point of allowing precious relationships to be severed. But it's abundantly clear in Jesus' words that he would have us always take the first step toward healing and reconciliation, especially with those who are our opponents or whom we call our enemies. If you read the gospel with this in mind, you'll quickly see that this is what Jesus was talking about. This is what he did. He drew people together. He created and helped them to recognize the connection between them and between them and God. Jesus taught his followers to work and work hard, to work sacrificially, to enhance the connections between us and others, to work together as a community, especially to address the needs of those persons who were struggling and on the fringes. As people of faith, we'll not get anywhere until we recognize how we are made to be connected. And until we are willing to work and work hard to enhance, strengthen, and even create those connections where they're not recognized. At times, when we have focused on those connections between us and others and between us and God, we have succeeded and we have prospered, because when we are pulling together, Jesus does indeed join the work party, and our strength is increased to equal the tasks of his calling. Amen.